I'm not going to lie. There's a good chance Aaron Rodgers shows some signs of decline this year, but that may not keep him out of the MVP race. How can both these things be true? Let's talk about it today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, August 30th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast for us, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. Today we have our weekly mailbag show. Most weeks we do our mailbag on Wednesday, but because of all the roster moves the Jets made this week, we had to push it to Friday. So thanks to your patience and thanks to everybody who sent in questions. And let's begin with a question on Aaron Rodgers. John, what do you think the odds are Aaron Rodgers wins the MVP this year? It's a really interesting question. I think there are a couple layers to that question. But before we get into what I think the odds are, let's go to the actual odds. And our friends at FanDuel right now have Aaron Rodgers tied with Jared Goff as the 11th most likely player to win MVP in 2024. Man, imagine telling yourself 3 years ago that Aaron Rodgers and Jared Goff would begin a season with equal odds winning the MVP. 3 years ago, Rodgers was coming off his 5th MVP. Goff was a guy the Rams couldn't get rid of fast enough because they felt they needed to upgrade the quarterback position to win a Super Bowl. And I guess they were kind of right, but Goff has had a little renaissance in Detroit. So that tells you as much about Goff as it does about Rodgers, the way he's kind of reinvented his career in Detroit. So Rodgers, decent odds, 11th most likely player in the league. And I think we need to acknowledge MVP is really a quarterback award at this point. It used to be kind of a quarterback running back award. Maybe another sort of player could sneak into the mix. It's almost a guarantee that a quarterback's going to win the MVP this year. And I think there are two things that dictate MVP votes more than anything else. One is statistics, and the other is storyline. And the media, you notice it through the year, the media likes to really drive certain storylines. And it's like all the national reporters kind of cling on to a narrative. So I think there is a path for Aaron Rodgers to win the MVP. I don't think Rodgers is necessarily going to play at an MVP level, though. So what do I mean by that? Look, he's 40. He's coming off a serious injury. Physically, he's not going to be what he used to be. He's not going to be able to make as many plays outside the pocket as he used to. But the Jets have the pieces around him that he can still be successful. He can still have an excellent statistical season because on paper, this offensive line looks really good. And it looks like the Jets have some good pieces at the skill positions. So I think Rodgers can have a good statistical season. And this is one of my broader complaints about the national media is that they tend to put quarterback's the most important position on the field, but they tend to forget there are 10 other guys on offense. And, you see this every year where some guy gets praised as the next great quarterback, and then the pieces around him aren't as good the next year, and he falls apart, and everybody acts like he's the worst quarterback in the world. I mean, Baker Mayfield's a good example of this. I mean, look at the roller coaster of a career Baker Mayfield's had. And almost every step of the way, when he's been in a good situation, when he's had good coaching, when he's had good pieces around him, he's been a successful quarterback. And when he's had bad situation around him, he's been a bad quarterback. And through Baker Mayfield's career, you've either heard him be praised as the next great quarterback, you've heard him criticized as the worst quarterback in the world. Jalen Hurts is another example. 2 years ago when the Eagles had all those great pieces around him, Jalen Hurts was a phenomenal quarterback. Then last year there are some struggles. Now Jalen Hurts all of a sudden isn't that good. Rodgers in his prime was one of the few quarterbacks who could lift up a team no matter who was around him. I don't think Rodgers is quite that anymore. Now, I think Rodgers is still going to be a well above average quarterback. And I think that's going to be a huge upgrade for the Jets. And I think with the pieces around him, he's still going to be very successful. I think he can put up MVP caliber stats. But I think part of that's going to be you're going to have other guys doing more of the lifting than you've seen with Rodgers in the past. In the past, Rodgers just did it all himself. This year, Rodgers will do a lot of it himself, but he'll also have some help from the offensive line and he'll have some help from receivers. So that's one aspect of it. I think the statistics are going to be there. The other aspect is media narrative. And this narrative writes itself. Rodgers coming back from the injury. Jets haven't made the playoffs in 13 years. Suddenly the Jets are good. It's all Rodgers. So there's a real pathway for Aaron Rodgers to win the MVP this year because the two components that you need both have a chance of happening. And if the Jets win games, he'll get credit. He'll deserve credit. I'm not saying he won't deserve any credit, But what I'm saying is that there are lots of good pieces around him this year. So I don't know if this is going to be Rodgers' best season if you're just isolating his level of play. I don't know if you put him on like a generic team that he would necessarily be in the running for the MVP. But if you put him on this Jets roster where you've got the pieces around him that will help him be successful. And I'm not saying he would be bad in another team, but I'm saying that I don't think his stats would be at an MVP level if you just had regular pieces around him. But with the Jets, you do. And with the Jets, you have the storyline of the team that hasn't been successful. The storyline will be that Rodgers is lifting them up. And of course, to a large extent, that will be true. But you also have the storyline of Rodgers coming back from the injury. I think everything's lined up for Rodgers to potentially make an MVP run this year. Our next question. Hi, John. I have a quick question about Haason Reddick. He now has about $2 million in fines. I know teams usually make up for this in the new contract, but doesn't that additional money count against the salary cap? If they have to increase the contract by $2 million more to cover the fines, doesn't that hurt the team? I don't think that $2 million at the end of the day, if the Jets and Reddick agree to a new contract, and look, I'm not sure they're going to do that at this point, but let's say the Jets and Reddick do agree to terms of a new contract. I don't think it's going to be like Reddick will say, okay, this was the original deal. Now you got to tack on an additional $2 million. I think generally speaking, when we talk about the new contract will cover it, it's that Reddick's going to make so much more money that the $2 million won't be as big of a deal to him. I don't think the Jets are necessarily going to come to a number and then tack on an additional $2 million to make Reddick whole again. I think the general perspective will be you're just getting way more than $2 million. Now that's still quite a bit down the line though, because the Jets have suggested they're not really interested in negotiating with Reddick until he reports to the team, and it's not entirely clear what they mean by that. I mean, do they mean that they're not going to negotiate at all? Is it he's got to play a couple of good games? The implication, some of the reports suggested that the Jets would have been open to negotiating a new deal with Reddick if he got off to a hot start this season, which I found kind of confusing because I think, you either think you can extend this guy or you can't. I don't know what a couple of games would do. Does it mean that they're willing to negotiate with him once he shows up? I mean, is all they have to do is practice? And I don't know exactly where the Jets stand on this at the moment. Maybe the Jets don't know where they stand on this at the moment, but I don't know that they're necessarily anywhere close to negotiating a new contract. We'll see what happens in the days and weeks ahead. I think that, logic would tell you that the best thing for Reddick is to show up and play. If he wants a new contract, sitting out's not going to help him get that. At some point you would think logic would dictate. With Reddick, I don't know. With Reddick, this almost seems personal a little bit. And I think like one of the things we kind of do is we kind of get tunnel vision. We think about things just through a Jets lens. Whereas with Reddick, this is a guy who's been in the NFL a long time. He's been very productive, especially the last 4 years, and he just wants to get paid. He's seen other guys who are less productive than him get the big money contracts, and he's just saying, when's it my turn? I don't think this is about the Jets. I just think this is about a guy who's been waiting for a long time to get paid, about to turn 30, and is kind of like maybe just drawing the line in the sand. I think this is a broader thing, and I think this maybe goes a little bit beyond what logic would dictate. I hope, hopefully he reports, because once he reports, I think, he'll show up, he'll probably play well, and, everyone will forget about this. But I don't know what's going to happen. But to answer the question, no, it's not necessarily. I don't think it's going to impact the team, though, because I don't think the teams are just going to come to a number and then tack on an additional $2 million. I think they'll come to the deal, and Reddick will say, okay, that $2 million doesn't really matter that much to me now because I'm making so much more money. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention back to the offense. What can we say about the targets Aaron Rodgers is throwing to? Any of them on pace to have? Can we expect any of them to have a big season this year? Well, I'll tell you what I think continuing here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Tired after lunch? Well, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone. Try them all. And on the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, again, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid through September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Again, the promo code is LOCKEDONFB. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONFB for $20 off your order. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. You've already heard the NFL division preview for the AFC East, but to become the most informed NFL fan, make sure to check out the entire 2024 Locked On NFL season preview, covering every division across the league from our 32 hosts like me who cover every team every day. This 8-episode series will stream live on the 24/7 Locked On NFL YouTube channel and Amazon Fire TV app. Check out all the action on Tuesday, September 3rd, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. The 2024 Locked On NFL season preview is the kind of analysis, insight, and entertainment you won't find anywhere else. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we have our weekly mailbag on Locked On Jets. Let's continue. Our next question is about the passing game, and particularly Aaron Rodgers' weapons. John, are you concerned with the Jets' passing game this season? Garrett Wilson seems to be a star. Breece Hall will probably be more involved. Aaron Rodgers will also elevate the passing game in ways we haven't seen. However, Corley seemed to be very underwhelming in the preseason. Mike Williams and Conklin could be good role players, but there's still some question marks around him. Well, I think the most important thing, and nobody should lose track of this, is that, I mentioned in the first segment about how, at 40 years old, I don't know that Aaron Rodgers is going to be peak Aaron Rodgers, but even an Aaron Rodgers in decline is going to be a huge upgrade over Zach Wilson and, the other guys the Jets had last year, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle. I mean, it was a pretty dismal situation for the Jets at the quarterback position last year. And while I think it's easy to blame Zach Wilson and the other guys for too much that went wrong, I think it's clear that Zach Wilson and Boyle and Siemian, they were not effective quarterbacks. Now, I think it's more complex. I think that there's some nuance to what happened last year. I think the offensive line certainly has to take its share of the blame for what happened. But the biggest upgrade the Jets will have is at the quarterback position. Even a Rodgers who's 80% of what he used to be is going to be a big upgrade over what the team had. And the other aspect of this is Rodgers is going to get you into the right play. And this is one of those things that kind of flies under the radar that we don't notice as much because it's subtle. And frankly, sometimes we can't tell what the quarterback's doing at the line of scrimmage. But Rodgers is going to be able to change plays before the line of scrimmage. He'll be able to scan the defense, see what they're doing. If the plays the Jets are going to run is not going to work, he'll make an alteration. And the odds of a successful play will go much higher because Rodgers knows what the defense is going to do. And he'll be able to get the Jets into a play that's likely to work. I think that on paper, this skill group looks fine. I don't think it's deep. I think if they're one injury away from having an issue. Garrett Wilson, I think, is excellent number one receiver. Mike Williams, if he's healthy, Mike Williams continuing to trend in the right direction. But, we're getting close to the start of the season. The start of the season is just over a week away, and Mike Williams is just starting to hit like regular practice reps. So Williams is a huge guy on this team because if he's the guy he's been most of his career, he's going to be an excellent number two receiver. And then after your number two receiver, I mean, I don't think there's a big difference in quality across number three. When you're talking about third, fourth, fifth options in the league, those guys aren't really the guy. Those aren't really the players who make or break your team. Now, I think there are depth issues because if either Wilson or Williams goes down, then you're back into a situation where who's your number two receiver? Is it Lazard? Is it Xavier Gibson? Is it Corley? You don't really know what you have. Essentially, if you have two good top two guys, if you have a good top two, the rest of it falls into place because there are lots of role players who are just okay. Like Lazard's fine if he's your fourth option. If he's your third option, you're fine. It's not the end of the world. If Lazard's your second option, that's where you get into trouble. And that's one of the reasons I think the Jets got themselves into trouble last year. I actually might disagree that Breece Hall is going to be more involved with the passing game this year. Breece actually was second in the team in targets last year. I would not expect him to be second on the team in targets this year, and I certainly would not expect him to have 76 targets like he did last year. I think the extent to which Breece was involved in the passing game last year was actually a reflection of some of the Jets' issues on offense because the quarterbacks had to check it down an awful lot because they only had one guy who could get open. This year with a second receiver who can, make plays, I would expect the target share for the running backs to go down. Now, Rodgers still will check it down. I mean, one of the things that's been true of Aaron Rodgers through his career is that he does not throw a lot of interceptions. And I think he's been as good as any quarterback at knowing when to take a chance. There's a sliding scale at quarterback. Are you constantly throwing the ball into double coverage? You're not going to be very effective if you do that. are you constantly checking it down? You're not going to be very effective if you do that. You need to know when to pick your spots. And Aaron Rodgers has been as good as any quarterback in the league at knowing when to pick his spots through his career. And sometimes that means checking it down. So Breece will be involved in the passing game, but I don't view Breece Hall as like this excellent receiver. I view him more as just an overall playmaker. And I know like you can cut up some clip on using the all-22 and show him running an effective route. I know Breece can run effective routes, but I don't think he's like a star receiver. I think it's just more he's a playmaker. And when you get the ball into his hands, he's got the ability to make a big play, whether that's taking a handoff or catching a ball out of the backfield. So Breece will be involved, but I don't think Breece is going to be like a central part of the passing game. I think it'll be more check down. Nothing's there. Let's just get it to Breece and see if he can make a play. I think, though, in general, the group is fine if everybody's healthy. I do think that there is a concerning lack of depth, and if they suffer one injury, then there could be some issues there. Because I mean, we're a Mike Williams injury away to being right back where we were last year, and I guess that's the concerning thing. Next question. Hi, John. Curious what you think about Tyler Conklin's prospects this season. Could he possibly have a sneaky decent year with all the defensive focus on Wilson and Hall? Yeah, Conklin's another guy. I kind of mentioned how I think Breece's receiving stats may go down. I think Conklin will probably be about the same as he was last year. He might even be lower because, Conklin was a guy Conklin got 87 targets last year. And Conklin's not like a Travis Kelce guy. He's not a George Kittle guy. He's not a Mark Andrews guy. Conklin's fine. I thought Conklin's 23 was much better than his 2022. I mean, I remember those first few weeks of 2022. During the early part of 2022, Conklin looked like one of the worst tight ends I've ever seen. If you go back and watch those games, he's fumbling, he can't catch. It looked like he didn't know how to play. 23, I thought he looked like a credible starting tight end. He even added the occasional, downfield contested catch. Look, most tight ends in the NFL, they don't really win you games or lose you games. They're just kind of there. And I think Conklin's kind of like in that area where he's perfectly fine as a starter. I don't think he adds a whole lot to the table. Going back to what I just said about Breece, Conklin is used a lot as like a check down guy. So like when Rodgers checks it down, he'll get it to Conklin. But I don't think Conklin's going to get 87 targets this year. So I think that he might be a guy who is more efficient on the targets he does get than he was a year ago, because Conklin, with the stats he put up last year, there was a lot of empty calories. Like around a quarter of his production came on third and longs where there was a check down and he got tackled short of the sticks, or was it when the Jets were being blown out in the second half of games? So like there were a lot of stats that were just not really that helpful to the team. I think you may get rid of some of those this year, and Conklin may be more effective. Does that mean his reception and receiving yard stats go up, though? I don't think so. In fact, I think it might go down. So, sneaky effective. Yeah, I mean, I think Conklin's fine. I don't think he's a problem as your number one tight end if he plays like he did last year. But Rodgers has never been a big guy throwing to the tight end. The tight end's never really been a focal point for Rodgers. So, I mean, the Jets are trying to feed this story. If you listen to the Jets, the beat writers, the stories they're fed by the Jets, everybody's going to have a breakout season. I think Conklin will be fine. I think, he'll add the occasional contested catch down the field. He'll be a check down outlet. And that's perfectly fine at the tight end position. I don't think Conklin's on his way to stardom, though. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, maybe we'll talk about a guy who could be on his way to stardom. Breakout predictions. As we continue our weekly mailbag, I'm going to be asked, which Jets player do I predict a breakout for in 2024? I have a couple guys in mind. I'll tell you who they are continuing here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Friday, we're doing our weekly mailbag show today. Our next question, who is your breakout player for the Jets in 2024? There are a couple of guys who potentially come to mind. I don't know if this is cheating. I actually think this is going to be Elijah Vera Tucker's breakout season because we know AVT can play effectively, but we know he's had trouble staying on the field. And I've said this many times. I don't think that this is like a Becton situation. Heading into last season, Becton was coming off 2 serious knee injuries. And he kind of had the feeling, in part because Becton said this, that the first injury helped lead to the second injury. And these were the types of injuries that a player may never come back fully from. Becton could get on the field, but there was a chance he was never going to be the same. Whereas with AVT, you've had 2 injuries. You had the triceps injury, and then you had the Achilles injury. That for players of his age, there's a very high recovery rate, and there's also not a super high incidence rate of re-injury. So I think the odds are better of AVT putting together a healthy season than a lot of people realize. Who else could have a breakout season? I'm hoping Will McDonald does, because I think Will McDonald's a critical player anyway. When Hassan Reddick's not here, Will McDonald becomes essential. So hopefully Will McDonald has a breakout season. If we're talking rookies, I think Braylon Allen's been the guy who's impressed everybody so far. So can a rookie have a breakout season? Potentially. Hopefully Braylon Allen turns into a really good number 2 back behind Breece Hall. If Braylon Allen turns into a good back behind Breece Hall, that means the Jets are going to get high caliber reps practically every down at the running back position. And that would be an excellent thing for this team. So those are my 3 guys. One guy from each area, an injury-related breakout, regular breakout year 2, and then a rookie breakout. So those would be my 3 guys this year. That's what we'll go with. Our next question, John, I've heard it mentioned many times through the summer by you and a lot in the league regarding the new kickoff rules. I'm still lost as to what the new rules actually are. If possible, could you provide a complete rundown as to what the new kickoff rules are and any other rule changes in the NFL to be on the lookout for? It's really convoluted. I can't blame you for not knowing. Even if you watch the preseason, you may be confused by this. So essentially the league changes kickoff rules. And I've talked about this a lot, sometimes as a joke, because whenever a team makes some sort of roster change, there's always some reporter floating out some theory. Oh, it must be because of the new kickoff rules. Doesn't matter what it is. Any move a team makes, the new kickoff rules must be the reason they're doing this. So in the past, the kickoff was from your own 35-yard line. The kicker kicked from the 35-yard line, but the other 10 guys were right beside the kicker, and they got a running start down the field from their own 35-yard line. Now the guys covering the kickoff, the kicker is still going to be kicking from the 35-yard line, but the other 10 guys are going to be 25 yards down the field. They will be at the opponent 40-yard line, and they are not allowed to run down the field until the kickoff is caught. Now the blockers, the 9 to 10 blockers who are going to be blocking for the return guys on the receiving team, they're all going to be stationed between the 30 and 35-yard line. They also cannot move until the ball is caught. So you'll have the blockers and the coverage guys starting 10 yards. All of them will be starting 10 to 15 yards from each other. All the coverage guys will be on the opponent 40-yard line. All the other guys will be they'll be 5 to 10 yards from each other. From the 30, the blockers will be from the 35 to the 30. The kickoff has to get to the air to at least the 20-yard line. If the kickoff falls short of the 20-yard line, then it's like you kicked it out of bounds. The receiving team gets the ball at the 40. So any kickoff that does not land inside the 20-yard line, that's essentially like kicking it out of bounds. The receiving team gets it at the 40. Also now touchbacks go to the 30-yard line, unless it bounces into the end zone, in which case it stays at the 20. So a lot of very convoluted rules on this. And watching in preseason, I had one thought come into mind. And that thought was, they made this rule change to try and preserve the kickoff because the kickoff's kind of been going out of the league. Teams have been returning kicks at a lower and lower rate every season. With kickoff returns are becoming extinct. So they brought these rules in. You've seen some of the minor leagues. The XFL had these rules, and they brought these rules in to try and bring back the kickoff return. And watching the preseason, I couldn't help but think, I don't know why are they doing this? Like the kickoff return, like when Codrington broke a big kickoff return against Carolina, it was exciting. Most kickoff returns just aren't that exciting. I don't know why they felt the need to bring this back, but they did. So those are the new rules. It'll look weird for the first couple of weeks, and then you'll probably get used to it, and it'll probably seem normal again. Last question from Chris. John, I was wondering if you think the Jets will win out and go 17-0 before they take home the Super Bowl, or if you think they'll drop a game or two along the way to throw the competition off their scent. I think they're going to drop a game or two along the way. I don't think the Jets, unfortunately, I hate to end on a negative note. I don't think the Jets will match the 72 Dolphins, but I think we're going to talk about this next week. I think things are really set up for the Jets to have a big season this year. I think everything's fallen into place. Even talking about preseason, the Jets avoided the big injury this year. I mean, how many times in recent memory have the Jets avoided some big injury in preseason? They kind of did it this year. So I know Reddick's not here yet, but I just feel like a lot's lined up for the Jets this year. They're not going to go 17-0 though. But I think this is going to be an excellent team. I think the Jets I think everything's lined up for the Jets to potentially have a heck of a season. And we'll talk about that in the days and weeks ahead, but that's all for this episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show or listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. We'll be back next week to talk more Jets.